Thank you for coming. I don't know about high-profile speaker, but I'm very excited to be here and appreciate you all making time today. I know this is a particularly busy week for you. I'm not sure if it's always this way in Tel Aviv, but it seems like there are like 5 events every single day. So appreciate that you came to this one. I'm sure you have other things that you're going to tonight. Excuse me. So I would love for this to be super interactive. I have some slides, but it's far less fun for you to just listen to me and me to present slides. And I know we have a ton of expertise in the audience, so would love to get your questions and comments as we go. I do have one quick question about the audience. Like, how many of you are working in open source right now? Okay. So who's just working with like a proprietary software company versus being an investor? A handful? Okay. Just trying to understand the audience. And before I get into the presentation, you heard a little bit about me. I want to talk just a second about Redpoint so you understand kind of why we're over here. Redpoint has been around for 20 years. We invest in software companies globally. About 70% of our investments are in enterprise software, and that includes infrastructure, DevOps, security, and data. We have several Israeli investments. Dragonfly, who's here, is one of them. We're really thrilled to be investors in Dragonfly, and my lovely colleague right there, Jordan, has been working with them and me on several other investments. We're also in Israeli companies like Orca Security and Sentinel One and Next Insurance, if you're familiar with any of those. And, you know, the truth of the matter is I joined from GitHub in January. Jordan joined just over a year ago. And we look at a lot of companies together, and we were just seeing so many amazing companies coming out of Israel, so much unbelievable talent. We felt like it's great to meet people over Zoom, but there's really no substitute for coming in person. So this is the first of many trips. We're really excited about the Israeli startup ecosystem. We're really grateful for how welcoming everybody has been. Thank you so much to TLV for just like jumping on this and letting us come and put together an event in their beautiful office. But that's why we're here. You will be seeing a lot more of us. And if you're looking for Series A's in particular, that's really our sweet spot. We typically write checks out of our early fund, which is the part of the team that Jordan and I are on, up to $15 or $20 million. And then we also have an early growth team that writes checks of $20 million and up. So we can cover a lot of different ground and stages of company, and obviously would love to talk to you. We also have a group that looks at fintech and consumer on the team as well. So while Jordan and I look a lot at, you know, open source and infrastructure, we have a lot of expertise across the team. And the one final thing I'll say is everybody on our early team are founders and operators, which I think is pretty cool and one of the reasons that I joined the firm. We've all kind of been there, done the 0 to 1, and then done the scaling of companies. So a little bit of a pitch, but I wanted to let you know a little bit about who we are at Redpoint and give you some context on some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Sorry, I'm going to drink a lot of water because I'm super jet lagged, by the way. So please forgive me for that. Okie dokie. So I'm here to talk about community today. And I think, you know, one of the first things that I thought when this topic was proposed for the conversation today is like just how freaking hard it is to do community well. Like there are so many folks when they're just starting out, if they haven't spent time in open source, or have never tried to build a community, that think it's just this kind of like build it and they will come thing. And every once in a while, you might catch lightning in a bottle, but really building an effective community takes a huge amount of work and commitment. And one of the things that we always talk to our early stage startups about is like, are you ready for this? Do you understand the amount of investment it's going to take? Are you thinking about this as, you know, an extension essentially of your marketing budget, right? What we see a lot of companies do is they spend less money perhaps on traditional marketing. They spend a lot of money on developer and community marketing and engagement in place of, you know, some kind of, you know, advertising or other customer acquisition methods. So, you know, the first point I wanted to make is just how big of a deal it is. Like do not even think about starting a community if it's not going to be an incredibly core part of your business and you're not ready to commit to it for the long term, because it is not a great look if you try and it totally flops because you don't give it the TLC that an effective community needs. And we'll talk a little bit about what that actually looks like. I saw nodding heads, so I'm guessing nobody disagrees with me so far. If you do, let me know. So, I pulled together a few reasons that we see communities fail over time. One of them is a lack of focus. Like, who are you actually trying to serve? Who are the people that you want in the community? What do you expect them to get out of it? What value are they going to get out of participating in your community? Are they going to be able to learn? Are they going to be able to grow? Are they getting professional networking? Are they being able to build their own brand, which is really important to a lot of folks working, especially in open source, right? Another thing that we see is people not just actively working on engagement. Whenever we're working with an early stage company, and we tend to work with a lot of companies that might be either very early revenue or pre-revenue, when they have perhaps a project that's out there that has a lot of traction. It's usually just a small team of engineers, and the first people we tell them to hire are people in DevRel and community, because I think getting on top of the engagement kind of train very early is what helps you build great momentum in your community. And the last one, I think, is if it's boring, that's also a community killer. I mean, if all you're doing is posting tech updates and there's no personality, there's no vision to it, there's no ways or opportunities to connect, you don't build momentum, you see a lot of people drop off. And I thought I'd take a minute to just talk about, this isn't an actual failure, but it was something that came to mind on the focus front. So we were looking at a company, we actually didn't end up investing, but it was an unbelievably hot open source project. Like, it went from 0 to 12,000 stars. I know you know which one I'm talking about. Basically overnight. And we were on the phone with the founder, and he was kind of literally not sleeping, completely fueled on caffeine. He was getting all these pull requests and issues and everything. And one of the things we told him was just take a beat, get clear on what you want to accomplish over the next few months, because you have to give your community direction. You can't just have it become a free-for-all. You're really lucky that people are coming and showing up to engage. If you don't engage back, they're going to leave, right? They're going to come, they're going to bounce, and they're going to leave, and you're not going to retain any of these people, and you're so lucky to have them all here in the first place. And so what we told him was, pick the couple things that are going to be your priorities for the roadmap, communicate them super clearly to the community, and tell people look, I invite your contributions. I'm so excited. I'm honored that you're spending time with this, but I can't get to anything outside of these two areas for a while. So I'm going to be only reviewing pull requests on this part of the platform. And I think it's easy, especially when you get kind of in the heat of the moment with a lot of community growth and interaction, to forget to stop and set expectations with your community up front. Where can people engage? How can they engage? And how can they start to connect with the rest of the community to get that flywheel going? I also wanted to take a second to talk about the different types of audiences in a community. This is specific to open source communities. I know we have a lot of that DNA in the crowd. So I think it's important to realize that obviously the broadest group of people that's going to engage with your project is on the user front, right? There are people that are just going to come. They might participate in your forums. They might create some issues and bug reports. They might join your Discord channel or Slack. But they're not actually going to contribute code. And that's actually how you build the most momentum in your project, is making sure that you're engaging with that group of folks, right? Making it really easy for them to get up and running with the product, give them a lot of ongoing ways to engage. And again, back to my earlier point about one of your first hires being in DevRel or community management, and we can and should, I don't have any slides on that, but we should talk about the difference between those two things, because there's a big difference in my opinion. But I think this the users are something you really can't lose sight of. Like sometimes when people are starting an open source project, they're just thinking about maybe the latter two categories or even the third category when it's really this community of users. I know everybody loves GitHub stars too. That's how you get those. I actually we look at GitHub stars and it's one proxy, but trust me, I spent a bunch of time at GitHub. I know how the algorithm works. It's something as an investor I'm slightly less interested in, but I know it's cool to be able to at least see people engaging around your platform. I'm much more interested in followers and how many people are, posting to your Discord channel, how many active members you have at any given time, how many different people are opening issues, are participating in GitHub discussions, which I think is actually an awesome tool that GitHub, I don't know if they promoted it as much as they should, but we've seen some really great successes with people engaging via discussions because it's just so close to the code. So the second piece is outer devs. And what I mean by that is people that aren't contributing the core of your software, but they're developing other things around it. Like maybe they're working on an SDK or an integration. So I think, making sure that this audience has clarity around okay, if I want to develop a plugin, if I want to, integrate with my other project, if I want to work on an SDK for a new language or something else, how can I go about doing that? I think, I am a huge believer in spectacularly good documentation. I think it's something that most companies, maybe 80–90% of companies, tend to underinvest in documentation. Thank you. I see heads nodding in the back. Yeah, I think first, shout out to the docs people around the world. I love you. I think you're super important. You don't get enough love. But I think, for all of these audiences, I think just having super clear docs and again, onboarding paths, you're lucky. We're all lucky if we build a project and people come to that project. And if we don't immediately give them an easy way to engage, you start to lose them and it's really hard to get them back. And then the third piece is inner devs, which are really contributors to the core project, right? And those, certainly as an investor, I'm typically much less interested in that. Most open source projects, until and unless they're under the auspices of a foundation that's a neutral body, most company-owned open source projects do not get tons of additional contributors. It certainly should not be part of your R&D strategy because counting on that is sure to fail. When you do get these folks, I think making sure that they get a lot of TLC from the team and you're really rewarding and recognizing that behavior, whether it's, giving them time with the founding team, whether it's, inviting them to speak at high profile events, whether it's sending them lots of swag and thank yous. A little goes a long way, but I think recognition for those folks and opportunities for growth and to really contribute to how you're thinking about the roadmap, for example, things like that is super important. So I have this little graph. I'll be totally honest with you. I stole this from my husband. It's out of his book. He's a way better, yeah, Sharon, I figured you would have seen it before, for sure. Yeah, do you?
That's a phrase I always attribute to John.
So it just so happens that my husband has been working in community development and management for 20 years. So he's really the expert. He's written several books on this topic. This is a graphic from one of his books. And I guess, I don't know if it's romantic and cool or really nerdy, but it's probably funny that our late night conversation is very often around open source community. I am, so we were consummate nerds. But I do think this graphic is great. And really the point is to capture this kind of journey of contributors over time and to understand that there is a journey, right? Somebody doesn't just show up one day and become a part of what you're doing. You have to be really deliberate about how you onboard folks into the community and then how you drive engagement and value over time. And the point of this first piece is it takes a while. According to Jono, it takes about 2 months to really go up this ramp to people getting clear value from a project. And there aren't labels on what these steps are because it's different for different audiences, right? So if you're talking about just a user audience, it might be that you are putting out a lot of great content, that you're holding office hours where they can come and ask questions live. We have a company we're invested in. It's called Dagger. It's from the founders of Docker. Super cool programmability for your CI/CD. But what they do is every week they host a community call where everybody can show up. People show demos of what they built with Dagger. And they get to give feedback on, sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, is that Solomon's?
Yeah, Solomon Hikes and Sam and Andrea and Eric. Yeah, it's very cool. They just launched a Go SDK. It's on, I don't know what date it is, last week sometime. And I think Python and Node are coming soon and GraphQL after that. It's really, really cool. Very early days, but they do know how to build a community. I think it's tough it's easy to argue with some of the Docker business decisions that were made. It's impossible, I think, to argue with the success of the technology and the community. But I think these early community calls that they've been doing have been incredibly helpful. And it's super motivating for the team, too, to see people in the community showing up, giving demos, sharing what they've done with others, and giving a lot of feedback to the product. They went through 63 prototypes before they even went into private beta. Like that was just with like a set of design partners. So yeah, I think, investing up front in driving engagement around just that initial part of the journey. Again, whether it's like, regular updates in a GitHub issue or something like that, or regular post in your Slack channel about what's going on, hosting community calls, hosting meetups. Like it takes a long time to start to help people feel a sense of connection and identity and belonging with a project. And then over time, you have to start deepening this in various ways, again, depending on the audience. But one of the things that we've seen be the most successful is just direct engagement with the founders or core maintainers of the project. And I think, sometimes first-time founders think like, oh, I'm going to do the work, and then like I'm going to bring in people because I have to run the company, and maybe it's the responsible thing to do to not spend time on this anymore, right? Because I need to be a CEO or a COO or whatever. And I think this is one of the areas where you really can never step back, right? Like the most successful open source projects, you always see really clear leadership, really clear roadmaps, very clear, consistent communication. And if it ever is time for somebody to step back, there's kind of a very clear transition plan that's actually talked about and not made secret, right? So I think just acknowledging these various aspects of the journey and how people's relationship with a community evolves over time is really important. I think I only have 2 more slides. Yes?
Are you seeing companies trying to, I'm coming from a SaaS B2B kind of background, are you seeing companies model this in amplitude or mixed funnel, the onboarding funnel, the retention, the different types? Is this something that companies are doing?
I have not seen them doing that much with community. Now, people track community engagement for sure. And actually, Jordan's been doing some work on that and is going to put out a post with a bunch of engagement metrics. But we definitely see tracking engagement. It's usually not super sophisticated, and it's not always linked into amplitude because of the different things people are tracking. Obviously, we see a lot more if you're talking B2B SaaS. I mean, amplitude, and some of our companies now are using Calixa too, which use in partnership with Amplitude to actually identify specific customers and their behavior and help surface for like a PLG motion. Hey, who can we go and look at upselling into our team or paid plan? So, yeah, that a lot. Community is not so much. Yeah.
There are companies that are trying to tackle that, like Orbit.
Yeah.
They're building, they're trying to build a platform specifically for them.
Yeah, there's another one. What's the other one we just saw? Thank you. Crowd.dev. Yeah, I think both are very cool. A lot of people have come out at this before. I don't think anybody has totally pulled it off yet. There's also a kind of a website, if you will. It's not a product really because it's a nonprofit that's not selling it, but the Linux Foundation has something called LFX that's actually not well marketed at all, to be honest with you, but it has a ton of statistics on open source communities and contributors and gives you visibility into top contributors for every project and project growth over time and events for each project. It's a really cool platform. But yeah, I think things like Orbit are taking a much broader look and are really looking to service companies that are looking to grow, whereas, the Linux Foundation, I think, was filling a void in the market, quite frankly, left a little bit by GitHub. I mean, a lot of that data GitHub could and has talked about delivering, but there's always a million things to do and haven't gotten to that yet. So this is some data from Slashdata. I wanted to at least show you some actual numbers. I thought this was really interesting. This is a recent survey. There were 12,000 people who responded, so it's a pretty good sample size. I know the text is a little small, sorry about that, but this is about the types of content that people consume when they're engaging with a community or with their peers around a project, whether open source or otherwise. Interactive events, obviously conferences and meetups are at the top of the list. I will say, a lot of folks are doing virtual events. We still see the greatest success with in-person events. I think people will continue to innovate and try to find the best ways to engage online, and it's certainly better than not doing anything. But I really do think there's a case to be made for spending time, especially with that core community of contributors, trying to find ways to get people together around a meetup and around an event. I know Sharon was just at KubeCon, like kind of having something, whether it's a birds of feather or something like that, you can even do for free at different community events is well worth the investment. Obviously, social media is a good way to keep top of mind for folks. Forum threads is the third one. Live streamed video is the fourth. And I'll tell you what, the video, I think, is just on the total rise. Like, we're seeing more and more success with video in particular. Even with Redpoint and our own social media, our video content gets far more engagement than most of our written content. People are just much more likely to share it, much more likely to engage with it. I think part of it is we were also sick of being apart in the pandemic and just like reading things all the time, that seeing somebody live and maybe even being able to ask a question is really appealing. And then, I won't read through all of those. I think one thing that's interesting that I will note, actually we've talked about a bunch at home too, is like one of the questions communities are always thinking through is, do you have like a Discord or Slack channel, or do you have a, Discord or discourse, sorry. That's the jet lag, totally blaming jet lag for that one. The discourse, or like another kind of community forum software. And I think they really serve two different purposes, but if you have to choose one thing I'll say is like Discord and stuff is really cool for real-time engagement and building some momentum, but you get literally no SEO and no searchability out of it at all. And when you look at I didn't put all the stats from Slashdata in here, but there's another slide about learning, and one of the top places that people go to learn is to forums. And it's not just because they want to engage in a forum, it's because the forum answers, the Q&As, are what's showing up in search results. So that's where people land. So I think it's just in this age of like Discord and Slack, which I personally use all the time as well, it's really important not to lose sight of the value of like searchability for your content, not just online, but I mean for your community users to go back and not have to ask the same question and get an answer over and over again and give people a chance to upvote it. I think there's some cool stuff getting built into Discord for that's making a little better, but you still lose out on the SEO benefits of the web, which I think are super important and these days I think fairly often overlooked. All right, I think this is my last slide. Okay, yeah, I had a few just like best in class metrics, because this is something that we get asked about all the time. Like, what does actually good community growth and momentum look like? I mean, these are kind of, I would say, these are minimum best in class metrics. So if you're doing this well, that's fantastic. We do see companies sometimes doing even better, but we're really looking for something like 10% month-over-month growth, whether that's in your Discord or in a discourse forum or something like that. New signups or downloads, those are kind of equivalent in this world. Or new registrations into your Discord forum. I don't know why that says signups twice. Oops.
I think it's supposed to be sign-ins because it's daily.
Yeah, sign-ins. Yeah, daily active. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, sorry about that typo. But yeah, daily active users. You're right. And what we're really looking for is daily active users divided by monthly active users. So what that really means is like, what percentage of your community is actually engaging in what you're doing, right? How many are like actively versus passively engaging? All right. Oh, I did have one more slide. Oops. I pulled a couple of things. This is actually from a post that one of our colleagues, Pat Chase, wrote. You can find it online or on my or the Redpoint site. We took a look at what some of the most effective tactics were for some of the most successful open source companies. HashiCorp and Cockroach were Redpoint companies, so disclosure on that one. Databricks and Confluent were not. They all use somewhat different strategies, as you can see, and they all proved to be very effective. Like their primary, these were their primary tactics, and these were the metrics that they used. I can tell you in the early days of GitHub, it was all about meetups. Like they literally had every single person in the company go to any local meetup they could find, talk about GitHub, get people excited and signed up, and it was remarkably successful. I mean, that can be taxing and takes a lot of people power, and there's a lot more you can do to fill in the gaps now that didn't exist back in the early days of GitHub, right? Hacker News wasn't even a thing then. But this just gives you some ideas of how people were actually tracking their community metrics and measuring their success month over month.